Welcome to Books on Point. Today we ask, what are democracies meant to do, and how does one know when they're in a democratic state? These incisive questions and more by leading political scientist Steven Friedman underlie this robust inquiry into what democracy means for South Africa post-1994. He joins us in studio to talk about his new book, Power in Action: Democracy, Citizenship and Social Justice. Steven, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
So, democracy doesn't seem like something we'd be questioning. A few years ago, it would seem even absurd that people would even be wondering whether democracy is dying or not. What prompted you to write this book?
Well, first of all, if you look around the world, democracy is in quite a lot of trouble. Whether it's Donald Trump in the US or Putin in Russia and various others one could name. These are people who get elected, but then they don't actually behave like people who are accountable to the people who voted for them, which is it's not what's supposed to happen in a democracy. If you look at our own country, in fact, there are a lot of people questioning democracy. They say, look, we've been a democracy for 25 years, there's still poverty, there's still inequality. There are people who say democracy is simply something which Western countries foist on African countries in order to keep them under their heels, and so on. So I thought it was important. Democracy is in trouble at the moment, and I thought it was important to have a look at whether these claims about democracy are true. And whether it is the problem that people say it is.
So in the world where we have Donald Trump, as you mentioned as well, President Erdogan in Turkey as well, why is it that we're seeing democracy take such hard hits at this point?
Well, in my view, the problem is that there are very well-organized minority groups who are able to get control. Trump, for example, didn't even win a majority of the votes of the American people, who are very well organized. And what they're doing is appealing to people who have been privileged in the past and who are worried that their privilege is going to go away. So white Americans start worrying about the fact that in 20 years' time, the majority of Americans will actually not be white people. And there are many other examples of this around the world. And that obviously underlines the point which I do make in the book. Voting is very important, but democracy is not just about voting. We don't go every couple of years and put a cross next to a ballot and then cease to be citizens for the rest of the time. We are citizens in between elections, which means that we're entitled to a voice, we're entitled to a say. In fact, the basic democratic idea is that every person should have an equal say in all the decisions that affect them. We'll probably never achieve that as human beings, but that's really what we should be trying to achieve and what we should be aiming for.
When it comes to African democracies, what are some of the misconceptions when it comes to understanding what African democracies even mean? Oh,
they're huge misconceptions. The major misconception, which I deal with quite a lot in the book, is that democracy is not African. It's some kind of non-African thing, etc. And really, everybody who tries to prove that democracy is not African lands up proving that democracy is very African. So academic colleagues, for example, they go to parts of Uganda, and I mentioned this in the book, and they interview people, and then they say, oh, but these people don't have democratic attitudes. And if you look at what the people in Uganda are saying, they're saying they want the people who lead them to be accountable to them. They want the people to lead them to allow them to have their say. They want everybody to have a say in the decisions, etc. So basically, they're expressing very democratic attitudes. And the reason why many people in Africa start to believe that democracy is not African is that there are a lot of people in the West who are trying to convince us that the only way we can be democratic is to be like people in Western societies, which is obviously not true. If democracy is the right to choose, and you want to choose your own customs and your own way of doing things, that's partly what democracy is there for.
Let's talk about the research of the book, because I love the way it was structured, the way you brought in various opinions from those who've tried to understand the concept of democracy. How long did it take to put the book together?
10 years.
10 years. Take me through that.
Now, look, what happened, it sounds strange. What happened was that the book was initially written about 10 years ago. And for a whole lot of professional reasons, which I won't bore you with, I just couldn't get back to it.
Yeah.
So what happened in 2018 is that, I mean, I've been wanting to do this for ages. I actually got a commission to write the book. And basically what I did is go back, obviously keeping those bits which are still relevant, but very often changing them quite substantially because a lot of things happen in 10 years. But really what I was trying to do, and hopefully that does come across, is look at what academics say about democracy, but to try to present that in a way in which it's not too academic and people can follow. And you know, if I've done that, that will hopefully help people focus their understanding more on what we mean when we say we want South Africa to be a strong democracy.
Speaking of that, when one wants to understand democracy in South Africa, I mean, from which lens do you then look at it?
Well, the lens I look at democracy, whether it's South Africa or anywhere else, is are more and more people taking more and more decisions over issues which affect them. In a sense, one of the ways you can always test this is that you take the weakest members of society, the people who tend to get listened to least. And I would argue, for example, as others would too, that the South Africans who are likely to be listened to least are single women living in poverty. Okay, they tend to be at the bottom of the pile. So what you would do is you would say, are those people being able to express themselves? Are they being empowered? Are they part of the discussion? Are they taken seriously? The answer in our case is that we still have a long way to go. You know, if you're middle class in South Africa, you have a say. And I think people underestimate how much of a say we middle class people have. But if you're that single woman living in poverty, bringing up 2 children on your own in a shack, you can go and vote, but after that you have very limited opportunities to express yourself. And I argue in the book that the main challenge of South Africa's democracy is how do we ensure that that woman and millions like her and others living in situations where they're not heard, how do we make sure that their voice is heard? Because the more their voice is heard, the more democratic we will be.
And I love the fact that you use the Treatment Action Campaign as an example, because they've done quite a lot in standing up for those who didn't necessarily have a voice and making sure that they have a basic right to the necessary medicine that they need. Stephen, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. You can, of course, find his book. It's titled Power in Action, Democracy, Citizenship and Social Justice, available at all bookstores. But we do have our recommendation book, and it's basically a follow-up from the previous book that we had, which was How to Get a SARS Refund for Individuals. This time, it's How to Get a SARS Refund for Small Businesses. It highlights various aspects such as VAT IT, pay as you earn, and various other issues that you as a small business could have. You could also get that copy. And that's a wrap for us. We say goodbye to our SABC3 viewers, but Nompumelelo will be back with more news at the top of the hour on the SABC News channel. Your weather details are up next. Goodbye.